Look at your life right now. You're holding an iPhone, there's a Starbucks cup on your desk, maybe you drove a Tesla to work today. You got a Pfizer vaccine, you booked a Delta flight for your next vacation. You think you're making choices, right? You're a consumer in a free market. Apple or Samsung, Delta or United, Pfizer or Moderna. You get to choose. And if you're smart, maybe you even invested. You've got a 401k, some index funds. You own a piece of these companies. You're not just a consumer, you're an owner. You're playing the game. But here's the truth they don't tell you. You don't own anything. You own a claim to a stock, a certificate, a number on a screen. The actual stock, the real ownership, the power to vote on how these companies are run, that belongs to BlackRock. You've probably heard the name. Maybe you've seen it on a building in New York. Maybe you even own one of their funds without knowing it. But let me tell you what BlackRock really is. They manage $10 trillion. Read that again. $10 trillion. That's more than the entire economy of Japan, more than Germany and the UK combined, more than most countries will ever see in their entire existence. BlackRock isn't just playing the game. They're not even just winning the game. They are the player, the referee, and the guy who owns the stadium. And you're just renting a seat. Welcome to the world BlackRock built. Once you see the invisible hand controlling everything, you can't unsee it. Let's pull back the curtain. When you think of monopolies, you probably think of the bad guys from history class. John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil, controlling 90% of America's oil, crushing every competitor, getting so powerful the government had to step in and break them apart. Monopolies were easy to spot back then. One company, one industry, total domination. But BlackRock is different. They don't own 90% of one thing. They own about 7% of everything. Let me show you what I mean. BlackRock is the largest or second largest shareholder in 495 of the top 500 American companies. Think about that. The S&P 500, the backbone of the American economy, the companies that run your life, BlackRock owns a piece of almost all of them. Apple? BlackRock is the second largest shareholder. Microsoft? Second largest. Amazon? They're in there. Exxon and Chevron? Both. Pfizer and Moderna? Yes and yes. Delta and United? Absolutely. Coca-Cola and Pepsi? They own both. McDonald's and Burger King? Yep. See the pattern?
This is what economists call common ownership, and it's killing competition in ways you don't even realize. Here's how it works. Imagine you own both Coke and Pepsi. If Coke cuts prices to steal customers from Pepsi, what happens? Pepsi loses money, but you still lose because you own both companies. So what's better for you? Keep prices high. Don't compete. Both companies make more profit. You win either way. This is happening everywhere. Your airline tickets keep getting more expensive. Why? Because the same investors own Delta, United, American, and Southwest. They don't want these airlines competing too hard. It hurts their overall returns. Your prescription drugs cost a fortune. Why? Because the same institutional investors own Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and Merck. Competition would lower prices and cut into profits. Your rent keeps going up. Why? BlackRock and a handful of other firms own huge chunks of the biggest landlords and real estate companies in America. This isn't a conspiracy. This is market structure, and it's completely legal. Standard Oil was broken up because they owned everything in one industry, but BlackRock owns a little bit of everything in every industry, and somehow that's fine. The old monopolies were visible. They had names, faces, villains you could point to. BlackRock, they're invisible. They operate through index funds and ETFs that millions of ordinary people invest in without even knowing what they're really buying. You think you own these companies, but BlackRock votes your shares. BlackRock decides who runs these companies. BlackRock shapes corporate strategy. You're not an owner. You're a passive investor giving BlackRock the power to own the world. And they do. But owning shares in everything is just the beginning. BlackRock's real power comes from something most people have never heard of. It's called Aladdin. No, not the Disney character. This is something far more powerful. Aladdin stands for Asset, Liability, Debt, and Derivative Investment Network. Sounds boring, right? Like some internal software tool. But Aladdin is the most powerful financial tool on Earth. Here's what it does. Aladdin is an artificial intelligence system that monitors, analyzes, and predicts the movement of over $21 trillion in assets. That's not just BlackRock's money. That's money from over 200 of the world's biggest banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and governments. Let me put that in perspective. $21 trillion is roughly 10% of all the money in the entire global financial system. Aladdin sees everything. It knows what every major institution is buying and selling before they even do it. It analyzes millions of data points per second, interest rates, currency movements, geopolitical risks, corporate earnings, social media sentiment, weather patterns that might affect crops. It's like having a God's-eye view of the entire financial world. If you're a hedge fund manager, you're trying to get an edge by analyzing one company or one sector. Aladdin is analyzing the entire market in real time and telling its users exactly what to do. And here's the terrifying part. If Aladdin glitches, the whole global economy could have a seizure. Think about it. 10% of all global assets rely on one system, built and controlled by one company. If Aladdin goes down, or if it makes a bad call, trillions of dollars could evaporate in minutes. We almost saw this happen. In 2019, Aladdin had a technical issue that briefly disrupted trading across multiple markets. Nobody panicked because it was fixed quickly, but it exposed just how fragile the system is. One company, one AI, $10 trillion. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Aladdin doesn't just give BlackRock information, it gives BlackRock power. Because BlackRock sees what everyone else is doing, they can front-run the market. They can see trends forming before anyone else. They know which stocks are about to rise or fall because they can see the collective behavior of hundreds of institutions all at once. It's like playing poker when you can see everyone else's cards. Now, BlackRock will tell you they have Chinese walls, internal barriers that prevent them from using Aladdin data to trade for their own benefit. But ask yourself this. If you had access to the greatest financial intelligence system ever created, would you really not use it? Aladdin is BlackRock's secret weapon. It's the reason they're not just big, they're untouchable, and almost nobody knows about it.
Now, owning 7% of everything and controlling a $21 trillion AI system would be enough to make BlackRock the most powerful private entity on Earth. But there's one more thing that makes them truly unstoppable. They're not just powerful on Wall Street. They're the invisible fourth branch of government. Let me show you the revolving door. When COVID hit in 2020 and the economy went into freefall, who did the Federal Reserve call to help manage the crisis? BlackRock. The Federal Reserve, the most powerful financial institution in America, the one that controls interest rates and prints money, hired BlackRock to manage the emergency bailout programs. And what did BlackRock do with that power? They used government money to buy corporate bonds. And guess what? Many of those bonds were BlackRock's own products. They were literally using taxpayer money to buy assets that made BlackRock richer. Conflict of interest? Sure. Illegal? Apparently not. But it gets worse. BlackRock's former executives are everywhere in government. Brian Deese, BlackRock's former global head of sustainable investing, became President Biden's director of the National Economic Council, one of the most powerful economic positions in the country. Michael Pyle, BlackRock's global chief investment strategist, became chief economic advisor to Vice President Kamala Harris. Adewale Adeyemo, a former senior advisor at BlackRock, is now the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, the #2 person controlling America's financial policy. See the pattern? The people making the rules are the same people who used to work for the company those rules are supposed to regulate. And it goes both ways. Former government officials leave their posts and go straight to BlackRock. Former Treasury secretaries, former Federal Reserve chairs, former presidential advisors. It's a closed loop. BlackRock writes the playbook, their people go into government and turn that playbook into policy. Then they leave government and go back to BlackRock, richer and more connected than ever. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is documented fact. You can look up every name I just mentioned. But here's why it matters. When BlackRock's people are in the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, and the White House, who do you think they're really serving? The American people or the company that's going to hire them back in a few years with a multi-million-dollar salary? In 2008, we learned that some banks were too big to fail. In 2020, we learned that BlackRock is too big to regulate. They don't just lobby the government, they are the government, at least the part that controls money. When the same people are writing the rules, enforcing the rules, and profiting from the rules, what do you call that? Most people would call it corruption. BlackRock calls it public-private partnership. Either way, you're not part of it. So let's zoom out and look at what this all means. You live in a world where one company owns a piece of almost every major corporation. That same company controls an AI that sees 10% of all global money flows. That same company's former employees are running your government's economic policy, and millions of people have no idea any of this is happening. Welcome to neo-feudalism. Here's what I mean. In the old feudal system, you didn't own land. The lord owned the land. You were a serf. You worked the land, paid rent to the lord, and got to keep just enough to survive. Today, it's the same structure, just financialized. You don't own companies. You own a claim to income from companies. A dividend here, a stock price increase there. But BlackRock owns the actual voting shares. They control the companies. They decide who the CEO is. They decide corporate strategy. You don't even own your house, not really. You have a mortgage. The bank owns your house until you pay it off. And who owns the bank? BlackRock is one of the largest shareholders in JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup. You don't even own your retirement. Your 401k is full of index funds. And who manages the biggest index funds? BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, the big three, who collectively own 20% of every company in the S&P 500. You're not a capitalist. You're a renter in a system controlled by the new landlords. And here's the genius of it. They've convinced you that you're an owner. Invest in index funds, they say. You'll own a piece of the entire economy. And technically that's true. You do own a piece. But owning a piece without control is like owning a car without a steering wheel. Sure, you get to sit in it, but someone else is driving. This is why wealth inequality keeps getting worse. The rich own assets, real assets, businesses, real estate, private equity, things they control. The middle class owns claims to assets, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, things they don't control. And BlackRock? They control it all. So why hasn't the government done anything? Because BlackRock has figured out how to be too powerful to stop without technically breaking any laws. Here's how they did it. First, they hid in plain sight. BlackRock doesn't act like a monopoly. They don't price gouge. They don't publicly crush competitors. They just exist, quietly, efficiently, managing trillions. Most people don't even know what BlackRock does. If you ask someone on the street, they'll say, "Isn't that a rock band?" Second, they made themselves essential. Remember 2008, the financial crisis? The government bailed out the banks. But who helped the government figure out how to do the bailouts? BlackRock. 2020? Same thing. COVID crashes the market. Who does the Federal Reserve call? BlackRock. They've made themselves indispensable. The government can't regulate them because the government needs them. Third, they weaponized complexity. Try to explain to an average person how common ownership via passive index funds creates anti-competitive incentives in oligopolistic markets. Their eyes will glaze over in 5 seconds. BlackRock's power is hidden in the complexity of modern finance. Most people don't understand ETFs, let alone the systemic risks of concentrated passive ownership, and that's exactly how BlackRock likes it. Fourth, they bought everyone. BlackRock has former executives in the Treasury, the White House, central banks around the world. They advise governments. They manage sovereign wealth funds. Who's going to regulate them? The people who used to work for them? The people who will work for them in 3 years? It's the perfect crime, legal, invisible, unstoppable. So, what do? You're living in a world where one company has more financial power than most governments, where your investments, your retirement, even your democracy are shaped by an invisible landlord you never voted for. You have 3 choices. Choice 1, join them. Buy BlackRock funds. Buy Vanguard funds. If you can't beat them, ride the wave. Index investing works because BlackRock is so powerful. They're going to keep winning. You might as well get your cut. This is the pragmatic choice. It's what most people do. It's probably what your financial advisor will tell you to do. But understand what you're doing. You're giving up control in exchange for returns. You're becoming a serf in the new feudal system. Comfortable, maybe, but not free. Choice 2, stay away. Pick individual stocks. Invest in small companies BlackRock doesn't control. Buy real estate. Start a business. Own things you actually control. This is harder, riskier. It requires knowledge, effort, and courage, but at least you're playing your own game. Choice 3, demand change. This is the hardest choice and the most important. Common ownership is a structural problem. It's killing competition. It's concentrating power. It's turning capitalism into something that looks a lot like feudalism. The government needs to treat this like the antitrust threat it is. Break up the big 3. Ban institutional investors from owning competitors in the same industry. Require funds to pass voting rights to individual investors. Is this likely to happen? Not unless people start demanding it. But that's the thing about invisible power. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once enough people see it, change becomes possible. Here's the bottom line. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is market structure. BlackRock isn't evil. They're just really good at the game. They figured out how to own everything without owning everything, how to control everything without anyone noticing. You don't own property anymore. You own a claim to income from property that the Lord, BlackRock, actually controls. You thought you were living in a capitalist democracy, but you're living in neo-feudalism. The invisible landlord of the world isn't a person, it's not a government, it's a company with $10 trillion under management, an AI that sees everything, and former employees running the Treasury. Once you see the invisible hand, you can't unsee it. Welcome to the world BlackRock built.
So here's my question for you. If BlackRock controls $10 trillion, votes your shares, and their former employees run the Treasury, is this still capitalism, or is it something else? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm reading every single one, and I want to know what you think. Do you think this is a problem that needs fixing, or is this just the natural evolution of markets? Are you okay living in neo-feudalism as long as your 401k goes up, or does this make you angry? And if you're furious that nobody talks about this, subscribe, because we're not stopping. We're going deeper. Next video, we're breaking down Vanguard and State Street, the other 2 members of the Big 3 who make BlackRock look small. You've seen the invisible landlord. Now let's see the whole system. Subscribe, comment, share. Let's expose this together.